Well, it looks like a lot of folks have had a similar reaction to grief as I did. Um, oh, by the way, hello, every pony. Um, so yes, I figure we will go ahead and jump back into this. I mean, I think we're over halfway done. So, yes, we will get back into this because you all seem to want answers. So, Twilight kicked open the library door to enter, and not long after, slammed it back shut. The sudden noise woke a sleeping baby dragon who, instead of being up in his room, had been passed out on the couch. He had dark circles under his eyes, indicating his concern and fatigue. Noting the entrance of the lavender unicorn, Spike jumped up and pointed an accusatory claw at her. "Where in Equestria have you been?" he shouted at her. "You never told me where you were going. I was up all night." Spike's mouth stopped working as he took a better look at the mare before him. Her eyes burned red, her fur was standing on end, and her hoof looked crushed and bloody from where it had impacted the door. "Twilight?" the dragon began, suddenly very remorseful about his recent actions. What happened to you?" "Take a letter, Spike," she said in a cold tone, ignoring his question. "Now." Afraid of what could happen should he disobey, he picked up a scroll and quill, motioning for Twilight to continue. She took a breath, trying to calm herself as she made the hardest announcement she ever had. It was 10 in the morning. She had slept at Rainbow Dashes all night, a memory she knew would now haunt her for the rest of her life. If she hadn't hated herself enough before this, sleeping next to the carcass of one of your best friends didn't help much. The sad part was, that wasn't even the worst of it. Very soon, if not today, her friends may try and convince her otherwise, but there was one absolute truth. This could have been prevented, and Twilight was the pony who could have prevented it. She had seen the despair on Rainbow's face with her own eyes, and what did she do about it? Nothing. She wanted to die. For the first time in her life, Twilight wanted to die. She was too overwhelmed to maintain any form of stability, and that scared her. When she tried to imagine her future, she saw nothing. She couldn't picture it. It was black and empty, and that scared her. But she didn't have the luxury of death. It would only place a larger burden on the shoulders of everyone else, an unnecessary addition to the currently unknown pain they all possessed. It made her wonder for a moment if she had actually been the first in that room, if anyone else had seen that and just ran like she should have. In her heart she knew it wasn't true. The world wasn't that kind to her, and this was her guilt to carry, hers alone. So how was she supposed to share that? "Dear No, she couldn't start it off like that. It couldn't be another student-to-teacher letter. This was different. This was more important. And all titles they previously owned were now completely irrelevant. Celestia was no longer Twilight's mentor or ruler. She was just someone the unicorn needed to speak to right now. "Celestia," she began, more content with her greeting, "your immediate presence is requested outside of Ponyville Library." Spike scribbled the message as fast as he could, looking up at Twilight as he sent it with a small breath of green fire. "What is this about, Twilight?" The lavender mare exited the library, once again ignoring the dragon's question completely. There was so much on her mind, so much that Spike wasn't ready to hear right now, so much that only one pony in the entire country could handle it as it was. With a bright flash of light, that particular pony had arrived. Twilight felt electrified as the Alicorn's powerful magic surged through her, igniting every vein in her body. She looked above her, where the source of it was hovering regally. Gliding down to the soft-cut grass, Princess Celestia turned to the unicorn. "Twilight, what is the meaning of—" "Oh my," she said, only then noticing her student's physical condition. "What's going on here?" Twilight didn't answer. Instead, she simply walked towards her balloon and gestured for Celestia to enter. The Alicorn did as instructed as Twilight lit up the balloon, sending it afloat. For a while they stood in silence. Twilight wasn't looking at Celestia, and she hoped that the Alicorn didn't see how troubled she really was. Knowing the princess, however, she probably knew very well what was going on, or at least what emotions were cascading within the lavender mare. But Twilight had called her here for a reason, and she needed to speak. "Celestia," Twilight began, turning towards the alicorn, who looked a little surprised at the informal address. "I need you to promise me something." The alabaster mare looked puzzled, but nodded anyway. "Anything, my faithful student." "No," she corrected, causing even more confusion with her teacher. "I need you to promise me something. I need you to keep this promise for as long as you live." The cold, grave tone Twilight took almost caused the alicorn to flinch, and she would have had she not experienced pressuring situations for thousands of years. Celestia nodded again, but this time kept her silence. Whatever words she could have said wouldn't change much. "One day, I will fall," Twilight started, looking out of the balloon towards a marble house which was growing ever closer, "and leave you a phantom. I need to know that you will accept me for what I was and move on. Unlike Luna, I won't get a second chance, and I won't be returning." When the unicorn paused for Celestia to speak, she was utterly lost. It was taking all of her energy to keep a straight face, much less form discernible thoughts, but the words eventually came to her. "Twilight, why are you on such a dark topic?" Arriving at Rainbow Dash's mansion, Twilight landed the balloon and stepped out onto the clouds. The air around this place was still, and a sense of absolute dread hung over her. A familiar twisting knot in her stomach formed, causing her to flex her hoof in pain. This response to the environment wasn't lost on Celestia, who gently prodded the unicorn with her muzzle. It was now or never. Twilight breathed in slowly, tasting the rotting aura of death on her tongue. Sickened, the mare considered cutting her losses and turning around, but it was already too late for that. Extending a hoof, she once again pushed open the marble door, revealing the scene she hoped to never look at again. "Oh no," Celestia commented as she cantered towards Rainbow Dash, checking for signs of life just as Twilight had. Suddenly overcome with a mix of emotions, Twilight laughed bitterly at the familiar scene and shook her head. "How long has she been like this?" the alicorn asked. "An entire day at least," the lavender mare answered, her cold monotone showing no indication of changing. "I came over last night." Celestia studied the body for a moment longer before rising and walking over towards her student. She began to speak to the unicorn, curiosity overpowering her mind. "Who told you what happened? A friend? A Ponyville guard? A The alicorn stopped speaking as she watched Twilight close her eyes and let out a pained sigh. Then the reality of everything hit Celestia like a train. You found her like this," she said, more to herself than Twilight. "I could have foreseen it," Twilight admitted, ashamed and disgusted with herself. She came to me yesterday in the worst shape of her life, and what did I do? I ignored it. I let her walk out. I allowed this to happen. Rainbow Dash is dead, and it is my fault." Celestia knelt down to the unicorn, feeling her rage as it emanated from her body. Twilight was impossibly powerful, and whatever she felt was forced upon every other being. In this situation, it was far from pleasant. The alicorn had to say something, or the consequences would be devastating. "No, this isn't your fault, Twilight. You had no idea. You could have never seen this come. Do you ever think..." "Celestia?" Twilight interrupted, catching the white mare off guard. What?" "I asked, do you ever think," the unicorn repeated, albeit louder than the first time. "About yourself? About the world? About what's really important?" "No, I guess not. I've always been content with just living life as it comes to me. Why so cryptic all of a sudden? This isn't like you at all." "I have lived for eons, Twilight. Of course I think about bigger things," Celestia answered dismissively, unhappy with the change of subject. "I know you are in pain, but I've never seen you talk like this, so dark, so..." So cryptic? Twilight asked, completing the mare's sentence. Celestia nodded. Twilight, did she say anything before she went? Thank you for the tea. No, she left a note, Twilight said, until now having hid the memories of the accursed thing. But I burned it. It made no sense. It wasn't emotional or anything. It didn't even explain why. She couldn't tell me why. Twilight felt her eyes burn. She couldn't deal with this. She couldn't cry in front of her teacher. She wasn't going to give Celestia the burden of seeing this. She was a stronger mare. She cared too much, and she had to detach herself. She had to fix things before anyone else could see her as she was. My faithful student, Celestia said, wrapping a wing around Twilight. Please, come back home with me. You shouldn't be here right now. I don't need to uproot my life for this, she said. I'm not a filly anymore. The alicorn nuzzled her student gently. Age doesn't matter, Twilight. We all feel sorrow. Come home, please. For me. Twilight stepped out of the alicorn's wing, making her way for the mansion's only exit. I'm not going to Canterlot. I owe her more than that. I have to host her funeral. And then what? Celestia asked in a harsh tone, startling the unicorn. You never think these things through. You're going to wallow in self-pity and ruin your life for this. No, I won't, Twilight shot back. You don't know me as well as you think you do. Celestia shook her head. Is that so? Think about when Discord showed up. You had turned against all your friends, and there was no hope for your victory whatsoever. I would have figured something out, Twilight argued. No, the alicorn corrected. If I hadn't sent your friendship letters back to you, this entire country would be in ruins. For what seemed like hours they sat in silence. Twilight had yet to face Celestia, who was now sweating from the tension that formed within the room. The alicorn looked back and forth between her student and the still body of one of her best friends. Realizing the stress that the unicorn must have been under, Celestia swallowed her pride. Twilight, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I just... No, the unicorn said, cutting her off. No, no, no. You don't get to do that. You don't get to talk to me like that. Twilight turned around violently to face her mentor. Just who in Equestria do you think you... But Twilight was no longer in the presence of Celestia. Standing before her, proud and tall as she'd ever been, was Rainbow Dash. But there was a key difference between her and what she used to be. She looked older, more graceful, more alive. Once again the irony wasn't lost, but this time there was no laughter from either pony. The background seemed to fade out as the Cyan Mare spoke. What are you doing, Twilight? How are you here? She asked, backing up as far as she could into the void. You're supposed to be dead. Twilight was absolutely terrified. Something that didn't pass over Dash lightly. She walked to the unicorn and put a comforting hoof on her shoulder. Maybe so, but you obviously are seeing me for a reason, even if I'm not real. The Lavender Mare looked at her friend in confusion. But... why? Twilight, the second you start blaming yourself for other ponies' deaths, you lose yourself in the process. She didn't know why. She didn't know how it came about, but hearing this didn't help the unicorn. It didn't bring her peace. It infuriated her. It made her more angry than she'd ever been in her life. You want to give me advice? She screamed, shoving Rainbow Dash off of her shoulder. You didn't have to go and do this. You didn't have to die. I did. Who are you to go and do this to me? She asked, her emotions reaching their peak. Just who in Equestria do you think you are? I think I'm some pony who loves you very much, Twilight, Celestia said, holding the unicorn in her hooves. Twilight gasped, looking around the room to see no sign of a living Dash, only the lifeless body lying next to the bed. It was too much. She didn't care who saw anymore, but for the first time since finding Dash, she cried. Hot tears fell to the floor as the Lavender Mare sobbed violently, pushing on her temples as she did so. It was painful to the point where it frightened Celestia. "Twilight, are you—" "No," she said in between sobs. "I'm not okay." "Shh," Celestia said, rocking the unicorn back and forth. "Everything will be fine." For the first time in her life, Twilight didn't believe her. She didn't believe the one pony who had taught her everything she knows. Celestia may be wise, but this was something that even she couldn't possibly have dealt with. The unicorn was so scared, confused, and shaken to the point where she couldn't even function. "I need help," Twilight said. "I can't do this." Celestia ran a hoof through her student's mane, shushing her as she did so. "And you'll get it. You're going to be okay, Twilight. I won't let anyone else hurt you." With a scream that had been long repressed, the lavender mare picked up the book in her mouth and threw it at the mirror, shattering it. But when she whipped her head around to face her accuser, she was met with only the emptiness of Celestia's bedroom. Twilight let out a second shout, slamming her hoof on the ground as she fell to her knees. There was no one there. There had never been anyone there. She was alone. And that is the end of Grief. And yes, in case you were asking yourself this question right now, no. You didn't get any closure. They didn't answer any of your questions. That's it. It's over. And yes, I am bothered by that just as much as you are. But, anyway, we did it. We made it through the story. We can move on from here. There's another short story I want to do because it's been on the list for a little while. And then we'll probably start other stories after that. So I will probably have time to do the other short story tonight. We will see. I haven't read it yet. It may be just as rough as this, and if it is, who knows how long it could take me to record it. I guess we'll find out. Anyway, thank you for sticking with me through this, because it was rough. So yes. And thank you all for listening.